Welcome to MacroCode. If you're new to this channel, consider subscribing. So today we're going to proceed and create a RESTful web API using ASP.NET Core in .NET 8.0 alongside Entity Framework Core. So as of now, I'm sure you are all aware that .NET 8 is the most recent long-term support version and is actually scheduled until November 10th, 2026. So I want us to create a simple ASP.NET Core Web API. Then we should be able to do a versioning. So we are going to create a simple students web API. So I'll create my project. So on my template, I'm going to choose a web API template, and as you can see, we can actually type here ASP.NET web API. And I'll choose one of the template here, then we can use it. So there we go. So as you can see on my list, I have a template for creating RESTful web API using ASP.NET Core controllers or minimal APIs. So I'm going to choose the first one. So if I proceed, there we go. I need to assign it my project name. So I'm going to develop, let's call it students management web API. So that is my name of my project. So you can give it the name, your preferred name. So going to click next. Then here you can see it is, I can choose .NET 8. So I'm going to have it with .NET 8 framework. Then identity type, that is authentication. I'll just leave it as none. Then configure for HTTPS, I'm going to tick it. Then I also want to enable OpenAPI support, and we are going to use controllers. So if I click create, my project will create, and you should be able to have a simple web API with some dummy data. So if you're new to this channel and you are watching our video and you have not subscribed, please consider subscribing, like our video, and let's begin. So as you can see on our project now, we have our program.cs file, which is actually the entry point to our API. Then we also have app settings, which is actually where we'll configure our database connection. And you also have some controllers, that is the weather forecast controllers, which is actually showing us sample data, how our REST API looks like. And we have weather forecast model. So if we just launch our API, we should be able to see some data within our API. So let's just launch and see. So that is within our weather forecast controller. So as you can see, it has some data here, and we have a get method, which actually gives us the data. So let's just launch our app and see. So there we go. So our API is here. So as you can see, this is our students management web API. It has launched, and this is Swagger. So as you can see, we can actually try our API. If we just click on it, we can try and execute. Then we should be able to see the results. So you see, this is the data that we've received from our get method within weather forecast controller. So, and you can see we have date, temperature, and summary. So what I want us to do is I want us to create a model. Then we can link this to our database, and we should be able to do a sample CRUD operation using our API. So to begin with, I want us to go to our project. Then let's create a folder called students. So, or models, let's create a folder first called models. So I'm going to create here a folder called models. So let's just stop our API, then name this, then call it models. Then I'm going to create a folder called, that is a class. I'm going to create a class called student. So this is a student. Then here, within student, I'll have some properties. So I'll do int ID. Then we'll have a get set. Then we are going to have some few properties here. So one is a string. Then you can have first name. I'll do first name. We also have another one here, middle name. Then I'll also have last name. We'll also have can say date of gender. We'll just do that, and I can also have date of birth. I'm going to have those few properties so that you just demonstrate how this works. So as you can see, that is okay. So the next thing that I want us to do is I want us to link these to I want us to use Entity Framework Core. So as you all know, Entity Framework Core is actually an object relational mapping framework that simplifies the data access. So model classes that doesn't have any dependencies on EFCORE. So they just define the properties of data that will be stored in the database. So we are going to use what we call code first approach. And as you can see, we've developed our model. So we need now to install some NuGet packages. So I'm going to manage NuGet package. Then within our NuGet package, we need to install some NuGets. So I'll just go to the Browse tab, then search here Entity Framework, Entity Framework Core. So I'll install Entity Framework Core, the first one. Then I'll also install Entity Framework Core.SQL. So we are going to use SQL to link this to our database. So then I'm going to install this one, Entity Framework Core SQL. Then I'll also be installing another one called Entity Framework Core.tools. So let's just confirm, accept. So this is the one here. I'm going to install these as well. So if you're using a different database, then it will also determine the kind of NuGet package that you install. So for me, I'm using Entity Framework Core.SQL, but in case you're using Postgre, we have this. So this is the NuGet package that you should install. And we also have another one for, you can see here, we also have for SQLite. We have for my SQL here, that is pomelo.entityframework.mysql. So that is what you should install. So I can also find my NuGet packages here. As you can see, I have the NuGet packages that we've installed here. So the next thing that I want us to do is I want us to create something called database context, which is actually the main class that coordinates the entity framework functionality for a data model. So to create that, I want us to create a folder. So let's create a folder, and we are going to call that database. So let's just create that folder, and we can call it database connection. So that is our folder. So here I'll add a class, another class, and I'm going to call that class application DB context. So let's just call it application DB context. So after creating that class, then you are going to inherit something from, we are going to do it here dot full colon, then db context. So db context. If we just do that, we should actually be using, if you hover on it, we should import something. So we should import and using Microsoft Entity Framework core. That is what we've just installed. Then after doing that, I want also to have a constructor here. So I'll just do CTO. Then I tap, then I'll have my constructor. So inside our constructor, I want us to add something. So I'll just do db context options. Then I'll pass my application db context. So I'll just zoom this. Then here I'll do options. Then after that, I'll just come here outside my brackets. Then I'll just do full colon, then base. Then I'll have my options. So this is options. Yes, so what is the name that you just provided there? It is options here. So once you do that, then we are good. So the next thing that we need to do is to now add what you call a db set. So the db set code establishes that's a property representing the entity set. So I'll just do public, then db set. Then I'll have my model here, which is the student model. So I'll use student. Then this, I'll now give it the name of my students. So this is students, and that is how my table will be named. So in the language of entity framework, an entity set generally aligns with a database table. So, and an entity corresponds to an individual row within that table. So you see we've done a db set, then students. So this will be our table name. So the next thing that I want us to do, we need to create our database. So I'm going to open my Microsoft SQL Server. Then we can try to connect to create a database, and we should be good to go. So I'm going to open my SQL, that is Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. Then you're going to create a blank, that is an empty database without tables. Then we should be able to see how we will be able to create these tables. So I'm trying to open my, so let's just do, so if you're new to this channel and you've not subscribed, please consider subscribing, like our video, and comment down below. So this is my Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. We have my database here. So these are my databases. So I'm going to create a simple database, and I'm going to call it RestfulAPI. So let's just call this, give it a simple name called RestfulAPI. So this is RestfulAPI. So if we do that, so REST actually stands for representational state transfer, and it serves as an architectural style guiding the development of RESTful API. So it establishes standardized communication between computer systems on the web, facilitating seamless interactions. So REST actually operates on a client-server model, allowing both applications to evolve independently without dependencies. So as you can see on our tables, we don't have anything. So the next thing that I want us to do is to actually connect this to the database. So we need to connect our application to the database. And to do that, we'll actually connect it using our app settings .json file. So let's just go to our app settings.json file. You can see here, this is where we should have our connection. So I'll just do that, then I'll type in connection. So I'll do connection string and tap. Then this is where we'll have our connection. So I'll just do here default connection. So after doing that, I'll put in full colon, then a server. So you need to provide the server name, and the server name is, we can get the server name from here. So I'll just do this and I'll get my server name here. Then if I do that, so I'll just paste my server name here. So that is my server name. The next thing we need is our database. So we need to specify our database. So I'll also copy my database name that we just created, and this is the name, RestfulAPI. So I'll just copy it, come here and paste. Then the next thing is I want us to have, can do trusted connection. Then we set this to true. So set that to true. Then multiple, we'll do multiple active result set. So also set that to true. So multiple active result sets. Then we also have trust server. So do trust server certificate. Then set this to true as well. So just do here true. So as you can see, we now have our, everything is okay. So what I want us to do next is let's just put in here comma. So the next thing that you need to do is actually called dependency injection. So dependency injection is a fundamental concept in ASP.NET Core where the framework is constructed around it. So during the startup of the application services, we need to include EFCORE DB context. So we need to register our EFCORE. So come to program.cs. So what we need to do here is we need actually to register. So I'm going to add some services here. So I'll just do builder, then dot services, then dot add DB context, add context, add DB context. Then we need to supply our application DB context. So that is our context. Then within our, so for our context, we need some options. And one of the options is we need options. Then we say dot use SQL. So we are using SQL Server. So then after that, we need to establish our connection. So we'll just do builder, then dot configuration. So we need to get our connection, and you can see get connection string, and we need to supply our connection string. So inside get connection string here, we need to give it the name of our connection string, which is part of this. So this is actually the default connection. So that is what we should add it here. So after that, then we need to close it at this end. I'm going to do that way, and we should be good to go. So after now doing that, we've established a database connection. So what we need to do is to do migrations. So this will, so migrations empowers us to construct a database mirroring our data model and adjust the database schema with when modifications occur in our data models. So what we need to do, we just go to tools, then NuGet package manager console. Then here is we need to, there is some very important commands that you should run. So one is add migration command. So when you click add migration, so when you add migration here, so we'll just do add migration, then give the name of the migration. So I'm going to say initial migration, then press enter. So the add migration command produces code to establish the initial database schema derived from the model outlined in our DB context class. So the initial migration argument is the migration name, and any name can be used. So you can choose. So after running our migration, you'll notice that there is a folder that will be created called migrations, and we will have our migration name, this name here, initial migration generated. So if you can see, it has done it successfully. And if you come to our project, you'll see there is a folder called initial migrations. And we have now our file, this file, initial migration, as part of our items here. So you see, we have the initial migration created. So the next thing is we need to run another command called update database command. So that is now where we'll be able to create our table. So if you come to our database, you'll find that we don't have any tables at this point. So to create this table, as you can see on our app method, we have create table student with these columns: ID, first name, middle name, last name, gender, and date of birth. And you can see you have a constraint, which is ID, which is actually our primary key. So I want us to go back to our console. Then we need to run update database command. So this will now create our table. So press enter, and this will create our table in our database. But you see, there is something that we've done wrong. So you see trusted connection, key not supported, database RESTful API, trusted connection. So when you go to our app settings, that is where there is an issue. So we've said trusted connection, and we have trust server certificate. So there is something wrong here. Let's just counter check. We need to check that our connection is well put, otherwise we'll be having issues. So this is trust. So this is our database name. This should not be that way. We should have these as is equals RESTful API, then trusted connection. That is how it should work. So let's go back here and clear, then update the database. This is actually a command that also tries to connect to our database. So in case our configuration file is wrong, then we'll have a problem. So as you can see, I think everything is now okay. And if you are keen here, we have our table called EF migration that actually tracks the migrations that we have done. And also, if you can see on this code, you'll notice that there is some SQL commands that you can tell. So here is statements I mean. So here we have the create table students, ID, first name, last name, gender, and even date of birth with our constraint. So if you copy this code, you can actually execute and our table will work. But now this has been done for us. So if you go to our tables and refresh, we should be able to see our students table and our EF migrations history table. So our EF migration history table tracks our history of migrations, but now we have our students table with all our columns. So the next thing that we should do now, you see we have our initial migration file has been tracked, and in our students table, we don't have any data so far. So let's just create and see, select. There we go. As you can see, we don't have any data. So the next thing is I want us to create our API, that is the endpoint. So let's go to controllers, right click. Then I want us to add new, then new scaffolded item. So I want us to add controllers, API controllers with actions using entity framework. So if you do that, it will generate all the CRUD endpoints. So let's just do that. So it asks us to choose the model. So we are going to choose our model, which is student. then our database connection DB context class, which is our application DB context, and you can see the controller name is students controller. So if you press add, it will actually install some NuGet packages that will help us to scaffold, and it will generate our code. So it will create a students controller with all the endpoints. That is the create endpoints. So let's just wait and see if our app will create all those endpoints. And if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing, like our video, and comment down below. So we notice 90% of you guys are watching our videos and you've not subscribed. So if you're one of them, please consider subscribing. So let's just wait and see as our app generates the code. So there we go. So our code has been generated, and you can see we have the students controller. Then the root is API, then controller, and this is API controller. So then we have our get method, that is the get students method. Then you also have get student by an ID, that is getting one student. Then you also have the put students. This is used to update our students detail. You also have post student. This is used to register a new student. Then we also have delete student. This is used to delete a student, and a student exists. So this is used to check if that student exists. So if we run our app, we should be able now to see our new endpoints, and we should actually test and see if there is data or we don't have any data. So let's just launch our API, and you should be able to see our API here. So as you can see, we have the students management web API, and this is the student API. Then we have the endpoints, the get, post, get by an ID, put, and delete. So if we just try test here and execute, you should notice that we don't have some data in our application. So you see there is an issue here. It's telling us failed to fetch, possible reasons, network failure, URL schema must be HTTPS. So let's just see if this is okay. So let's just do that. So as you can see here, our code. So let's just go back to our app, to our program.cs. Then I want us to do something here. So I want us to say builder.services. Then I want us to do dot. So we'll say add course. So I want us to use that. So if we do that, then it should be okay. Then here I'll say app.use course. So I want us to use that. Then if we do that, let's also relaunch our app and see. So add those services. Then if we relaunch our app, we should try to get some data. So if we try this now, we try and execute. So let's just check. So this is trying to fetch some data from our database, and you can see everything is now okay. Our response is 200 code, and the response body, you see it is actually empty. So what I want us to do is I want us to insert some data. So how to do that is we'll actually use, you can use Postman to test this, or you can actually use Swagger to actually send some data to our database. I'm going to try out. So here I'll just have my ID as 0. Then first name I'll do macro. Then middle name is code. Then here I'll do subscribe. So if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. Then I'll have my date here. Then I can put in my date there. So if I do that and click execute, our student will be saved, and it will actually return for us the student details that it has saved. So you can see it is a success, and you can see it has returned us the the details that we passed, but at this point, it has added the ID. So this is actually auto-generated and it's actually a primary key. So it has added for us the ID. So that ID is what has been returned from the database. So if we go to our database and go to students table and execute, we should be able to see we have now a student with an ID 1, macro code, the last name is subscribed, gender is male, and we have that as a date of birth. So if we go back to our API, we can now execute the other methods. So I'm going to let's try to add some new students. So I'm going to do here macro code 1. This is 1 execute. Then I'm also going to do 2 then this is 2, then execute. I'll also do 3. So try to add in some data. 3 execute. Then as you can see, so if we go back to our students, get students, I can execute here and I'll get all my 4 students. So you see, so you can see I can now get my students list here, and we can go ahead and try to update some of the details. So to update, I'll be using post. So I want us to update our student 1. So we'll pass. So here if we click try, we'll now have to know the ID. So I'll just pass student 1 and I say macro updated. Then our last name was code. Then we can have updated. Then last name is subscribe. Then you can say updated. Then our gender was male. We can do female now. Then we can have that as our date of birth. So if I just execute, so here we'll pass 1. So if I just execute, our student details will be updated. So let's just see. So here we are passing ID 1. So let's try it. So if we go to our students, so let's just try to get, you'll be able to see that we have our macro code. The first student with ID 1 has been updated to macro code updated, subscribe update, and we have our female. So you can also do the same. So if we pass our put, we can do here 2, and here we can say 2. So if we click, this will actually update our student. So if we just go back here and execute, then we will have our data with macro code updated. And you can also get 1 student. So if we just try get API by an ID, if we try here, I'll just pass ID. So I want the student with the ID 4. If I execute, you see it has given me the students with the ID 4. If I do 2 and execute, it will give me the data with ID 2. So I can also do a delete. So to delete, I'll execute the delete endpoint. So here I'll just try and execute with ID 4. And if I try that, my students' details will be deleted. So if I come back to get, I should only, you see, we had 4 students. So for now, if I try, we should only be having 3 students. You see, we now have 3 students. So the next thing that I want us to do is API versioning. So I want us to do some versioning within our API. So the one thing that I want us to do is we need to add some NuGet packages within, that is NuGet package within our API. So let's just go to NuGet package console. So I'm going here. Then I'll just go this NuGet package console. So let's just stop our API. Then I'll just do here, I'll just do manage NuGet packages. Then we need to install a NuGet. and that NuGet is called MVC versioning. So let's just type that, and you should be able to see one of the NuGet packages. Yes, so this is it. So we are going to have we have SP versioning MVC Explorer. So this is extension for ASP.NETCode-API versioning. So we can actually now install this, and I'm going to install that. So if we install that, then we'll have a way to now have our API versioned. So accept. Then I'm also going to install this. So if I just click install, then we'll have our NuGet installed. So as you can see, we've installed our NuGet. So what I want us to do is I want us to go to our program.cs file. Then I want us to do something here. So here I want us to have a builder. We'll just do builder.services. Then here we'll do .add API versioning. Then inside here I'll just do X represents. So I'll do that. So I'll do that. Then I'll just do X the default API version. So we can have our default API version. So our default API version, you can say it is so this should be API version, and you can say our default. So you can import. So here I'll just do new API version. Then I'll say our API version is that. So we need to import the using API versioning. Then we need to close this. Then we can also say assume default version when unspecified. So that is if you don't specify, then it will assume. Then you can say report API versions. You can say that to true. So if you do that and we launch our app, so our API will actually have a default API version of 1, and we should be able to see that. So let's just see. Let's launch. So if we launch our API, this is how our API looks. So every time you see here, we can actually get our students. So there we go. And you can see there is something wrong. So if we just do that, you see we need actually to specify now our endpoints, and we need to specify our API. So what I want us to do, let's go back to our API, that is students controller, and I want us to add our version. So here, I want us to do after the controller. So I want us to do here. I want us to do this way, square brackets. Then we say API version. So if we do API version, then we should do that. So we should have our version. So if we have our version, then we should be able to get now our students data. So let's just confirm. We launch that and try to do get students, execute. So let's just confirm. As you can see, we should be able now to get our students data. So you can see we are now using API version 1. So but now the best thing is, assuming we want to have different versions. So I want us to do something. In our controllers folder, I want us to create another folder. Then I want us to name it as version 1. Then we'll be having our version 1 controllers in this folder. So I'm going to call this v1. So that is our, then I'm going to move our controller, students controller, to our v1 folder. Then we can create another controller. So the reason as to why we are doing versioning is assuming you want to improve our API and it's already in production. We don't want to be affecting those users who are using the endpoints. So we'll just be switching and having a new version, and they can now be alerted to use the new version. So this one will be my v2. So you see we now have two controllers here. We have students controller and we have these as students controller. But now I want us to say here, this is version 2. So I'll just do here version 2. And if I try to run our API, let's just run. Yes, we have something. So what we need to do is we need to change this to v2, the name of the controllers. Then here I'll also change this to v1. So if we do that, we also do the same for our constructor, and also do the same for this constructor here. So we now have two endpoints, that is two controllers, one for version 1 and one for version 2. So let's just launch our app. So if we do that, you can see we have a v1 and we have a v2. So if we try to execute version 1 here, you'll notice that we are able to get the data, as you can see. And on version 2 as well, we can execute here and we should be able to get the data as well, you see. So we can actually enhance our version 2 controller without touching version 1. And you can see it is using the same endpoints. So another thing is, assuming we want to have our endpoints, instead of just executing this, we can actually have our endpoints with specifying the versions. So I'm going to program.cs file. Then I want us to add something here called, so say API version reader. Then we'll do new header API reader. Then I'm just going to have this as X API version. So I want us to do something called HTTP header based versioning. And we can also come here on our controllers, and instead of having this this way, we might need to have our endpoints being specified with the versions. So I'll just do something here. So I can actually do this, and inside here I can do v, then I can say API. So I just do v, and then I'll say API version. So if I do that, then I can close this here. So if we have that, then we should be able to specify now our API version whenever we are calling our endpoints. So let's just do the same for our version 2. So you can do this. So if I launch our app, let's just launch our app. We should be able to see that our endpoints will actually change, specifying our, you see, this is our endpoints, and we should actually see here. If we try, we need to specify versions here. You see the version that we need to specify, I'll do 1. So if I execute, I'm able to get the data. So you should actually specify now the versions while executing while pointing to the endpoints. And you can see here, it is now showing version 2, and this is version 1. But we need to specify the If you actually want the users who are consuming our endpoints to specify the versions, then you can do that. So we've added that. So I'll just do here version 2 and execute. So that is how you do it, guys. You create a simple RESTful API and you can consume it. So I'm going to leave it there for today. If you like this video and you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing, and see you in our next video. Bye.